morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and as always told, out of PTCGRadio. So today, we're going to be having a look at a very weird deck that just went and won a tournament over in Japan. I should at this stage give a huge, giant thank you to Code64 over on Twitter, who usually is a person who provides me with these deck lists. And I always credit him in the description, etc. But I don't always shout him out on the video quite as much as I should. He's awesome. I love him. And these decks are awesome. This one especially, one that I didn't see coming. And it's all built around Tapu Koko. And the thing is, right, we're not even using Tapu Koko's bigger attack here. Like, as in, we're literally playing unit energy. And we're not playing the unit energy with lightning. You see, Tapu Koko here is purely here for flying flip. 20 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon. That's what it does. And I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, it sets it up nicely. You got decent HP, you got free retreat, and you just sit there doing 20 damage to all of your opponent's Pokemon over and over again. That is the early game plan. That is the main thing we've got going on here. But we also play counter energy, and this leads us into a very countery kind of deck. Although weirdly enough, we don't even have that many counter energy Pokemon here. The other Pokemon which is probably the best represented here is Weavile. Now this is the one from Burning Shadows that does 60 damage to each Pokemon that has an ability. You will notice as we go through this deck, we are not reliant on abilities. To put that even more bluntly, there is not a single Pokemon in this entire deck that uses abilities. So you just get to spread a whole bunch of damage around. And let's face it, right, Naganadel is everywhere. We've looked at so many Naganadel decks lately. Although annoyingly, Naganedel's got 130, which means you won't be two-hit KOing them with Weavile. That is going to happen a few times with this. Now, you can actually use Weavile's second attack here, because of unit energy, because of counter energy. You do 70 damage. It's alright. It's not stunning. I mean, if you're hitting for weakness against stuff like Bayonet, you're still not that close, because we're not actually playing Choice Band here. This is for the spreading attack. And then we see just a whole bunch of one-offs. With it being Tapu Koko in a deck that plays counter energy, you've probably guessed at this stage that we're playing Tapu Lele. We're actually playing the Fairy Tapu Lele here, although as I often say, it doesn't really matter. You're generally using this for the attack, which for a counter energy, as long as you're behind on prizes, lets you rearrange the damage counters on your opponent's side of the field. Why are we playing the Fairy one here? Bearing in mind that the Psychic one is really good for hitting weakness on Buzzwole. And the reason's extremely simple. It's because we're playing the unit energy with Fairy in. Which means that you can use non-counter energy to get this going. Either a unit energy and anything else, or a unit energy with a counter gain. Yep, we need to talk about counter gain at this point. If you're behind on prizes, your attacks cost 1 colorless less. And this is a deck that plays a lot of counter gain. 4. And it plays a lot of counter energy. 4. And it even plays a counter catcher. This is a deck that does not mind playing from behind. First of all, in the early game, you're often just going to be spreading damage around with Tapu Koko, and essentially, if they don't take a KO and put you behind on prizes, you just keep flying flipping. And if they do take a KO and put you behind on prizes, brilliant. Now you get access to all of your counter tricks. It's lovely. So counter gain here is great, although obviously that's also if you're behind on prizes, or counter energy, or unit energy. That's why we play the Fairy Tapu Lele here. Probably not hitting quite as good a weakness, though you are hitting weakness on Rayquaza. But really here, it's because we're playing the unit energy. Speaking of the unit energy, we're playing the non-GX Buzzwole. If your opponent's got 4 prizes remaining, you do 120 for 1 energy. You're playing entirely non-GX Pokemon. You can guarantee that your opponent either loses, wins because they kind of deck you out, or has 4 prizes remaining, which means that you're going to be able to use this. That's another reason why we play the fancy unit energy. And then there's a couple of weirder ones that have not actually been released here yet. We've got White Kyurem. The second attack here is good. 160 if you've got a fire energy on it, i.e. 2 water and a fire. The thing is, we need to remind ourselves about counter energy here, in that it says it provides every type of energy. So it can be a water energy to pay the cost and a fire energy to do the extra. You can actually use counter energy and counter gain here to use this attack to do 160. It's not going to happen all that often, but it's an option that you've got, and that is beautiful. More likely here is the first attack, 30 damage and discard a stadium in play. It gets rid of Prism Star stadiums, like Thunder Mountain, which is going to be really, really handy. Plus, it does mean you hit against water-weak Pokemon, which is always nice. We've got Victini here that I absolutely adore. It does 20 damage for each of your basic Pokemon in play. All of your Pokemon are basic, which means you should be hitting 120 for a counter energy. But as a fire-type Pokemon, so against stuff like Golisopod, for instance, you're absolutely golden. And then we see one copy of Cabal Ian here. And when I looked at this Cabal Ian, I basically said, hey, this is the new, potentially, counter energy metal Pokemon. And for a counter energy, 30 damage, and you take 30 less from attacks next turn. Or a counter energy and something else, 80 damage, 120 with a tool attached. Good for just buying yourself a little bit of time. Good for a little bit of extra protection. Good for hitting weakness if they're weak to metal. There we go. So it's a weird kind of Pokemon line here. The energy line, I mean, I've hinted at it, but let's look at it specifically. 4 double colorless, because double colorless is basically what most of your Pokemon need. 4 counter energy, because it's a counter energy deck. And 2 of the unit energy with Darkness, Fairy, and Fighting. Although generally speaking, it's Fairy for Tapu Lele and Fighting for Buzzwole. Then we get into the trainer line here, and there's a lot that we would expect. Cynthia and Lily are our draw supporters of choice, because they're the best draw supporters, to be honest with you. We then see a Guzma, which is good for dragging Pokemon off the bench. But then we see one Tate and Liza. It's a decent draw supporter while also being a switch. 2 copies of Judge. They're not good draw supporters, but it's good for disruption. If you know your opponent's got that beast ring, get rid of it. 2 copies of Professor Kukui, because you're not always doing quite enough damage with this deck, so doing the extra damage is good. And 1 copy of Sophocles, for those that have forgotten it doesn't see a huge amount of play. Discard 2 cards from your hand and draw 4. Which seems a little bit weird, but actually here, there are a bunch of cards that you might not need in particular matchups, and just flat drawing 4 can be really handy, so that's quite nice. We see 4 copies of Nest Ball, because honestly, it's just great for getting your basics out. And there's no Ultra Ball here. Now, I did say that all of the Pokemon in this deck are basics. Obviously, you've got Weavile here that aren't. And it makes it difficult to search for your Weavile, because the only Pokemon search you've got is Nest Ball. Having said that, you can always just attack with Tapu Koko, do a couple of flying flips, and draw into your Weavile as and when. If your opponent goes after your Sneasel on your bench, it means they're not taking out your Tapu Koko, and you can just keep spreading and spreading and spreading, which is kind of your early game with this deck. We see 4 counter gain, like we've discussed. It's good for bringing down the attack cost when you're behind on prizes, which you often will be. We see 4 copies of Acrobike. This is just a setup. You need your specific Pokemon at a specific time. You need to draw into your special energy. Acrobike is aggressive draw that lets you do so. Free Rescue Stretcher, you need to play a high count of Rescue Stretcher here, because you're playing a lot of one-off Pokemon. You need to get them back if you need them. 1 copy of Multi-Switch here. This is really good if you need to swap which Pokemon you're using. which you often will. Spreading with Tapu Koko, oh no, my opponent's got a Thunder Mountain into play. That's alright. Retreat for free, pop up your White Kyurem, use your multi-switch, and you're off. 2 copies of Escape Rope here. This is really good in Tapu Koko decks because your opponent generally has 1 Pokemon they want in the active. Escape Rope is a switch for you and it forces your opponent to switch, and yeah, they get a choice, but generally speaking there's 1 that they want in the active. This just makes sure they don't have that one in the active. We then see 1 copy of Energy Lotto. It's not perfect for searching energy, but it's the best we've got. 1 copy of Field Blower, it discards tools and stadiums. And then 1 copy of Counter Catcher, as we've previously mentioned. And the final card should not be a surprise to you at all. It's Shrine of Punishment. It's a non-GX deck that revolves around non-GX Pokemon. It's Shrine of Punishment, to be honest with you. You need to play it. You do extra damage. 1 damage counter to each EX and GX between turns. To be perfectly honest with you, it's needed. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. It is awesome. It's a really fun deck. It's a deck that takes a lot of playing. It's a deck which really, you need to be really careful about what Pokemon you play at which times. But I tell you what, it's got a lot of potential. But tell me what you think about this one in the comment section. I'm trying to bring you regular winning Japanese decks, but I would like to hear your opinions about them. Go nuts, but do please remember the rule. Be nice. And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, and follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, where you can learn stuff. Oh yeah, and then make sure you check out twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. That's where live action happens. Patreon.com/PTCGRadio. That's where you can support the channel and get bonus podcasts and demand that I make videos. And YouTube.com/WassyPlays, where we talk about other games, all of which are fun. But by far the most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves. Until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.